Welcome to Listen to This, where we have conversations examining how we can improve the quality and safety of healthcare. In this series, we'll dive into both current and long-standing healthcare challenges, and we'll shine a light on some of the work that is being done to address them. What can other industries such as design and technology teach us about problem solving in healthcare? And how can it be applied to improving quality and care for patients? In this episode, we discuss what taking a holistic approach to improving healthcare can look like, and talk about the kind of boundaries encountered when different disciplines are applied to finding innovative solutions to challenges in healthcare. Today, I'm joined by...
Hello, I'm Graham Pullin. I'm Professor of Design and Disability at Duncan of Jordanston College of Art and Design at the University of Dundee. I did a senior fellowship with this institute looking at healthcare, disability and prosthetics, which ended up being known as discussing prosthetics, aesthetics and ethics.
I'm Dr. Kurannen Baaki, a senior lecturer in building surveying at Liverpool John Moores University. I'm also a current THIS Institute Research Fellow, and my THIS Institute research is about sustainable healthcare waste management, which is my primary area of research interest.
Hello, my name is Niels. I am Professor of Data Science and Healthcare Improvement at the Healthcare Improvement Studies Institute at the University of Cambridge. And my research interest is broadly around the use of data and technologies to improve healthcare services.
I'm going to open it up to get your views on whether healthcare improvement studies are truly multidisciplinary. So you're all working across boundaries. Are we working well across boundaries in healthcare improvement? What are your thoughts, Niels?
So thanks, Kristina. Yeah, I think this is a really important topic and important question. So the way I tend to see this is that we always organize academic disciplines around theories and methods. And I think that's a good way to organize academia. But when we look at societal challenges, these societal challenges very often require input from many different disciplines. They cannot be solved by single disciplines. So if we look at healthcare improvement, that's a very good example. I think that always requires contributions from many different disciplines. As you can imagine, very often there will be contributions from people with a medical background, but also other non-clinical backgrounds. And obviously the social sciences come in, the behavioral sciences, design, and potentially many other disciplines. My own background is computer science. And in my field, where it's all about data and technology, it's even more important to bring people from different disciplines together. In general, we by and large know how to do this, but very often I don't think we do it as good as we could. And that's certainly true in my own field in data science.
Graham, are we working well across boundaries?
So I guess my answer to that would be that we both need to expand the boundaries, but at the same time work beyond them, even once expanded. My own concern, my own research is around disability and healthcare. And so what that calls into question is some really interesting questions about the relationship between healthcare and everyday life, particularly for disabled people. And so bringing people with lived experience of disability absolutely into healthcare improvement seems like a fundamental priority, more so than is the case at the moment. But at the same time, if we are to look at the relationship and deepen the relationship between healthcare and everyday life, then we need to involve people who aren't directly involved in healthcare at all, but are involved in other aspects of everyday life. And I think then there's some really interesting areas, some of which are defined in terms of academic disciplines, some of which are far more about culture and practice, and their perspectives on what it is we're doing in healthcare improvement are really, really valuable and illuminating.
I'll come to you, Kurannen. Where do you see the opportunities for crossing that boundary into healthcare improvement with more non-traditional disciplines.
From my experience, I would say the last 2 years, the immediate thing that comes to mind when you think about healthcare improvement is patient care and, the medical side of patient care. And I believe that the boundaries, as Graham has said, needs to be expanded. And looking at my own background from facilities management and my own sort of research, if you think I did my PhD, I did something on sustainable waste management, and I looked at how that could improve the bottom line of the hospital in terms of patient care, the financial aspect, sustainability, all of the parameters that you could use for measuring healthcare performance of a particular hospital. If you think of that as a whole, and you look at waste management, for example, as contributing to that from that perspective, then you would begin to see the boundaries expand beyond traditional sort of medical boundaries for addressing the patient care, and beginning to look at all of the other support services like facilities management services, and looking at how they contribute to providing an overall improvement experience for patients and for the hospital setting. So I would agree that the boundaries need to expand, and that is one example. Finding myself within this space and then immediately seeing that is how the field of facilities management could contribute to healthcare improvement, both from a research perspective and from a practical application perspective.
Are there other disciplines that you've thought about that we could pull in and that could address specific challenges that we experience in healthcare improvement? Graham, I can see you looking keen to chime in.
Certainly when we were looking at prosthetics and discussing them with people with limb difference and amputees as well as healthcare professionals, there were some issues that were well understood and being well considered, such as the efficacy or practicality of prosthetics. There's definitely always discussion about the ethics of procedures and prescription. What we found conspicuous by its absence, I suppose, was discussion of the meaning of the aesthetics of prosthetics, the way in which how a prosthetic is designed in some ways defines not only its relationship with its wearer, but how that wearer might be seen by others. There are huge issues around disability identity and politics, as well as many others that are inherent in those questions. They're not being discussed. And so I think that's interesting, because it's possible that no one in the field at the moment, because those discussions aren't taking place, is in a particularly good position to start those conversations. And so reaching out with, even as far as fields like fashion and the arts could be a really good way of provoking discussion. And I wonder whether discussions around aesthetics should be seen as something rather distinct from those around ethics, which themselves attract a really interesting interdisciplinary group of people, don't they? I think it's tricky, isn't it? Because we want to talk about the things that we're not talking about at all at the moment. And by definition, we might need some disruption to help us do that.
Could I ask Graham, so it's really interesting what you're saying. So initially, aesthetics wasn't a topic discussed in this space of prosthetics. Why do you feel that was the case? Why was it basically an ignored topic?
Traditionally, the aesthetics of a prosthesis were to do with passing as a human limb or body, weren't they? We know things are much more complex than that. We know that passing as non-disabled is anathema to many disabled people, but not to others. This is something that's deeply individual, and so it's a more complicated and complex discussion. I think it's interesting. It's something that you would discuss in design as a discipline, but not with that expertise of prosthetics. I'm sure designers have something to contribute, but I would definitely go much beyond that and look at people who are responsible for not just creating, but also discussing visual culture and many other aspects of our society.
Kurannen, did you want to jump in and comment on this?
Graham made mention of the arts, and I thought visual arts, for example, what is its place in, let's say, improving patient outcomes? For example, think about things like music. What's the place of music in improving patient outcomes? The workplace as a whole. When we think about from a facilities management perspective, when we think about the workplace, we think about the place that people interact and work and all of those. But in a hospital setting, the workplace includes, or it's essentially made up of the patients, because that's who the space is, made up. It's made for. So if you think about all of these examples and think about what their contribution would be to improvement science, distinctively from that perspective, if you look at me, for example, as a facilities manager who's doing facilities management research, if I am removed from the healthcare setting, then what I'm doing, you might think, it doesn't really have relevance, with healthcare improvement in that sense. But if we bring it within this context and target research specifically to improving patient care, then I believe we can bring just about, think about any discipline. It can become part of improvement science. Not shoehorning, but I believe there's that opportunity for a lot of disciplines, going by the examples that I've just given and Graham has given, to really explore the boundaries of improvement research and improvement science.
Just to round off this discussion on where the opportunities exist or where the gaps are in healthcare improvement that could be filled by other disciplines, Niels, did you want to add anything from your own experiences?
Yeah, sure. So I think my fields, data and digital technologies is quite interesting from this perspective. And I think that a lot of people have considered this an area as an area of massive potential if you look at what has happened in other sectors. So, for instance, if you look at things like transportation and think of a company like Uber, for instance, that has just massively changed how transportation how is done as a business sector. Think about retail, for instance, completely transformed by companies like Amazon. Think about advertising, which has been radically transformed by Google now about 20 years ago. And it was interesting that when Google stepped into advertising, they didn't have any experience in the field, and people didn't take it very seriously, but they were able to transform it radically within a couple of years. Now, a lot of people have thought, okay, the same should be possible with healthcare. And so far, that hasn't really been true. We've not really had this radical transformation of healthcare services using data and digital technology. So it hasn't materialized. And the question is why that is. And I personally think that sometimes people who come from a technology background underestimate the complexity of healthcare systems and services, and believe that, you can step into this like Google did with advertising without any prior knowledge, and you can just make it happen with the technology. And that is just not true for healthcare. It is way more complex as a social technical system. I think it's fair to say that to a large extent, we still need to figure out how this works for technologies. How can we make this multidisciplinary collaboration work such that we can take advantage of data and technologies in the best possible way for healthcare improvement?
I'm quite interested in that you say that there was an expectation that in that data would do a lot more. And I am wondering, are we at the stage where we've slowed down too much in terms of making progress, in terms of the kind of data that we're generating? We're obviously generating much more data, but not doing what we thought we were doing. People are not walking in and out of hospitals as fast as they walk in and out of supermarkets or clicking onto things online. So what are your views? Are you worried that there might be a sort of an apathy to data? Is it starting to, are some of the disciplines starting to feel like an appendage? Could that happen? I've heard examples of people talking about how exciting it was to pull out checklists because aviation industries were using these in the past. What are your thoughts about what's the future of data and healthcare improvement?
Yeah, I don't think we're lagging behind on the data side of things. There is enough data, and we're collecting, enormous amounts of data within healthcare services and healthcare studies. I think it's about making the transformation happen, using new technologies that are based on data, where we are struggling and where we're underestimating the complexity of making that happen. So there's enough data, and there's so many initiatives that do things with data that, for instance, develop a new model. So we see new studies appearing almost every day where new models are being presented, but they never reach frontline clinical practice. They never change anything for patients. So I think that's the problem. We need to invest a lot more in understanding how the change works. And we know how to do the modeling. We have the data, but let's focus on the change.
I was listening then, Niels, to you saying that technologists can sometimes underestimate the complexity of healthcare. And I wonder if there's also a risk of underestimating the humanity of healthcare, if I can put it that way. And I'm not sure, in the area that I've been looking at, I'm not sure we do have enough data. I don't think we have data about how people's perceptions of their prostheses are affected by some of these nuanced aesthetic issues. But I think that's because we're not having those conversations in the first place. And so some things can be quite nicely quantified, can't they? And others can't, but they can be just as important to appropriate and successful healthcare outcomes. So it's not a either or, I think, but I think we might need to do both.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we've got enough data on certain aspects of health and healthcare, but probably much less so on the softer side of health and quality of people's lives, experience, and in the end, they are equally important. So I think you're right there. We're probably lacking there in terms of the data that we have.
I want to come to all of you personally and ask you, as researchers fully integrated into healthcare improvement and with these expertise in these disciplines, how does it feel in terms of your identity, in terms of your career progression, or just the support you've had in order to take your position within the healthcare improvement studies space? I'll come to you, Kurannen, first.
A good question. I think for me, it has been an exciting experience. Like I said earlier, I come from a facilities management background, and the whole thing about facilities management is looking at the way support services could make an organization much more effective. So looking at how you could take the things that the organization is not doing as core and then use those to support the organization's bottom line. So it has been something that has been quite fascinating for me. Even the term improvement studies, I could see that what I do, it's supposed to improve an outcome. And that outcome is the bottom line of the organization. So I really, I would say I really see myself within this space. And again, one example, during my fellowship, one of the interviews revealed something that I thought was fascinating, saying patients asking at a cancer center, for example, you generate this much waste just with me, where does it go? I thought that it's a very important question to someone who's coming for cancer treatment. You would think that their problem at that particular point would be that they've got cancer and they're being treated for cancer, but they want to know where the waste that is generated in the process of treating them goes. They are concerned about that. That really gave me a sense of, say, belonging and a sense of thinking, okay, what I'm doing could actually have real, even if it's indirect, real indirect impact on patient outcomes from a psychological perspective. If someone who has very strong views about the environment, for example, understands that the waste that is generated in treating them is not ending up through proper, channels that help mitigate environmental degradation, I don't think they're going to feel great about their entire hospital experience. I personally have seen myself, within this space. Of course, there's the challenge of others understanding that this particular discipline belongs in healthcare improvement, and understanding that is the contribution that brings to healthcare improvement. Like I said earlier, the immediate thought that comes to mind when thinking about healthcare improvement would not be facilities management, would be the medical healthcare interventions and other things that are associated with that. So from a personal perspective, I feel I belong in as much as I still need to reveal the value of this discipline within healthcare improvement research, healthcare improvement science. I feel personally that I belong within this space. So that would be my own personal reflection on my experience beginning on this journey within healthcare improvement science.
So Graham, the same question to you.
I confess to insecurity about my position relative to healthcare improvement studies, whether I'm whether I'm expert enough to be credible within such a deep and complex field, but also at the same time recognizing that the contribution I can make is to not be wholly inside it. And so that's a dilemma, isn't it? I think the way that I've reconciled that personally through the direction that my own study has gone in is to actually almost remove myself from the picture. And what I've ended up doing through the course of the study on prosthetics is to be, more than anything else, a mediator. So I've been making connections between individuals who are firmly within healthcare improvement and healthcare provision, and those who are firmly not, if I can put it that way, are conspicuous by their absence. And my role has then been one to make a bridge between the two. And one thing I would say is that I think I probably went into that role thinking that I'd have some kind of very deep role to play in terms of translating between people in different fields. And I must say, I found the opposite. I found that a lot of the conversations that I set up, once they'd started, were completely self-sustained by the conversational partners within and without healthcare, which implies to me that it's often a lack of imagination in setting up those conversations in the first place that is the stumbling block, rather than necessarily even any inherent inability to communicate across these boundaries.
I'm just going to move to Niels and talk about the same thing and ask you to kind of reflect on your own experiences and probably provide any guidance you might think might be the best way to get into healthcare improvement studies, being from a non-traditional healthcare background.
Yeah, so just an anecdote from my own history. I was trained as a computer scientist, and after completing my PhD in computer science, I got a job at an academic department in health informatics at a teaching hospital in Amsterdam, the Academic Medical Center. And I think in my first or second week or so, I was talking to a colleague who had a medical background, and he was talking about myocardial infarction, and I had no idea what that was. So at some point in the conversation, I had to confess that I didn't know what that was, and so I asked him to explain it. He was silent for a couple of seconds, clearly embarrassed, as was I. And then he said, "That's a heart attack." So a very awkward conversation. And it was certainly not the last one that I've had during my career, because it's not always easy if you try to work across the boundaries of disciplines. And disciplines try to protect people from doing that by speaking in their own language, their own jargon. So we computer scientists are also extremely good at that, as you probably may know. But the medics also experts in doing exactly that. So then trying to move between disciplines and crossing these boundaries is always going to be extremely hard. I would say to anyone who would consider such a career, do it nevertheless, because it's really a lot of fun and it's fantastic and very enriching. But it's also always going to be hard. That's part of the deal. And you will struggle with the language that others speak. And also others will struggle with understanding who you are. That's another consistent experience that I've had. So people try to put others into boxes, right? So for instance, when they look at me, they think, well, are you a computer scientist then? And I try to explain, no, not really. No, I was trained like a computer scientist, but I'm not a computer scientist anymore. And then they're even more confused. Who are you? So that's inherent, I think, if you work in healthcare improvement or any multidisciplinary space. But like I said, it's still worth doing it because it's very enriching.
It seems the opportunities are there. The appetite is certainly there for the community to grow and for more people to be involved in healthcare improvement studies. And you have all provided a very clear picture of what that could look like and what it currently looks like, that boundary crossing, that multidisciplinarity. So thank you very much. A big thank you to our guests who joined us. Graham Pullin, Kurannen Baaki, Niels. I've been your host, Kristina Wanyonyi-Kay, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to Listen to This. To find out more about this institute's latest research, visit our website and head to the podcast page for show notes and to hear the series in full. It's all at thisinstitute.cam.ac.uk. That's thisinstitute, all one word, .cam.ac.uk.